Welcome, dear listener, to the Sleeping Hourglass. This evening, we follow one such tale. The story of Simon, a scrappy ship's cat whose courage stretched far beyond his small frame. Through cannon fire and hunger, through storms at sea and battles on deck, he carried more than his whiskers and claws. He carried hope. He carried companionship. He carried the quiet, unshakable truth that even the smallest life can leave the deepest mark. And if this little pocket of calm brings you comfort, you're welcome to linger. You can subscribe or follow, not out of obligation, but simply as a way of keeping this gentle space alive. The story begins not on a grand stage of history, but in an alleyway. A place where most footsteps hurry past, where scraps of food scatter like forgotten promises, and where the glow of lanterns casts long, uncertain shadows. It is in such places that small lives begin, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and yet, sometimes, they carry within them the seeds of legend. The year is 1948, and Hong Kong hums with restless energy. The war has ended, but its echoes still rattle in the bones of the city. Ships fill the harbour like tired giants, bearing stories from seas near and far. Markets bustle with voices, the clatter of stalls, the hiss of woks. And down where the neon signs buzz and the gutters glisten with rain, another world thrives. The world of strays, where hunger is sharper than any blade and survival is the only law. Among them prowls a cat, small, thin, his fur patchy from fights and rain. His whiskers twitch like antennae, sensing danger before it arrives. He slips between crates stacked with dried fish, tail low, paw silent. The ground smells of salt and rot. The memory of the harbour carried into the narrow veins of the city. A boot lands close. Heavy, careless. He darts aside, vanishing into shadow. This is Simon, though no one calls him that yet. To the city he is nameless, one of countless strays. To the dogs that prowl the edges, he is prey. To the vendors, he is a nuisance. But in his small body lives a fierce intelligence. He has learned that fish bones are best stolen at dusk, when the light blinds and the crowd presses too tight. He has learned to listen for the scrape of rats who share his hunger but not his patience. He has learned that life is won in inches. A crumb here, a bone there, a patch of shelter against the sudden storms. Yet even in struggle there is poetry. The way he leaps from crate to barrel, a silhouette against the lantern glow, the way his eyes, bright as coins, reflect the chaos around him, the way he pauses, still and silent, as if listening to something beyond the noise, a call no one else hears. Stray cats are archivists of the forgotten. They carry in their fur the dust of alleys, the whispers of nights when no one is watching. And so, in Simon, history prepares its unlikely vessel. He knows nothing of warships or sailors. He does not yet understand that his paws will one day tread steel decks, that his whiskers will brush against uniforms, that his purr will comfort men haunted by fire. For now, he is simply hungry, and hunger has a way of guiding even the smallest creatures toward destiny. Hong Kong itself is a city of crossings. Cultures mix here, fortunes shift here, and ships depart here for journeys long and dangerous. In this restless meeting place, even a stray cat may find the thread of fate waiting to be grasped. On the waterfront, the Royal Navy maintains its presence, vessels rocking gently against the tide. One of them, HMS Amethyst, sits quietly at anchor, her grey hull unassuming against the crowded harbour. She is a warship by name, yet wary from years of service. None aboard know that the ship will soon sail into fire or that a cat from the alleys will become part of her heartbeat. But fate has its ways. As Simon prowls the alleys, he feels the pull of the harbour. The smell of fish guts carried by the wind, the sound of rigging tapping against masts. The sea is not his world, yet it calls to him in the way wide spaces call to all creatures who have only known confinement. He sits upon a stack of wooden crates, watching gulls wheel above the water. His tail flicks, his ears twitch. Something within him, perhaps instinct, perhaps chance, whispers that he will not always belong to shadows. Still, survival presses close. That night, rain begins to fall, turning alleys into rivulets. He curls beneath a tarpaulin, shivering. The city breathes around him, engines roaring, men shouting, children crying. Yet amid the storm, he dreams of warmth, of a place where food is steady and footsteps are kind. Cats do not dream in words, but in sensations. The press of a gentle hand, the comfort of steady breathing beside them, the taste of meals that do not vanish with the dawn. And though he cannot know it yet, these dreams will soon take form, for somewhere beyond the rain a sailor walks. His boots splash through puddles as he makes his way from the harbour into the tangle of streets. His name is George Hickenbottom. He does not seek a cat tonight, but life has its own designs. Soon his path and the strays will cross, and in that crossing, both lives will change. History often begins in silence. A general may draft his orders in a quiet room. A revolution may stir in the private anger of hearts. And sometimes, a legend begins with a pair of bright eyes glimmering from the shadows of an alley. That is where we find Simon, small, unnoticed, yet poised on the edge of a journey that will carry him farther than any stray cat has gone before. For the moment, the alley is his kingdom. He crouches low, waiting for the scuttle of a rat. His whiskers quiver. The night is deep, the storm easing. A lantern flickers above, painting his thin frame in gold. He is ready, always ready, to leap toward prey, toward safety, toward whatever the next moment demands. And so the alley holds its breath. The city continues unaware, but in this pause, we see the quiet truth that even in the most unlikely places, history gathers its threads. It prepares its stories not only in palaces and parliaments, but in gutters and shadows. Simon is no hero yet. He is only a stray. Yet already, his paws are moving toward a ship, toward men who will need him, toward a story that will outlive them all. And in the hush of the alley, as rain drips from the eaves, a small cat licks his paw and gazes toward the harbour, where tomorrow a sailor's hand will lift him from shadow into destiny. The alley is still damp from the rain when George Hickenbottom first sees him. It is early morning. The kind of hour when the streets are half empty, when shopkeepers lift shutters and fishermen haul their baskets through the mist. Hong Kong is stirring, but quietly. The sailor walks with no urgent destination. Only the rhythm of his boots on stone, only the hum of thought that comes when one is far from home. He has been at sea long enough to recognize loneliness. He carries it in his shoulders, in the slow way he walks, in the letters folded neatly in his kit. But today, loneliness meets another form of it. For between crates slick with rainwater, a pair of eyes glimmers out. Yellow-green, sharp, cautious, the eyes of a cat who has known too much hunger and too little kindness. The cat steps forward, thin frame tense. He does not trust easily. Men have kicked before, children have thrown stones. Yet something in the stillness of this sailor holds him there, poised but not fleeing. George bends slowly, careful as though approaching a wounded thing. He sets down a scrap of dried fish he bought at the docks. A peace offering, humble but sincere. The cat hesitates, then creeps closer. The smell is too much to resist. He eats quickly, every bite a desperate act, and when the morsel is gone, he lingers, looking up at the man with something like a question in his eyes. George sees more than hunger. He sees a creature surviving against odds, stubborn and unwilling to yield. In that frail body is a quiet strength, and perhaps George, a man pulled from his own familiar shores, feels a kinship. Perhaps he recognizes that both sailor and stray live by endurance, by weathering storms until gentler days return. He reaches out, palm open. The cat tenses but does not run. Then, in a motion that will change both lives, George lifts him. The fur is damp, the body light, the ribs sharp beneath the skin. Yet in his arms, the sailor feels not just weight, but trust, tentative, trembling, but real. It is a small gesture, the kind of act that goes unnoticed in the chronicles of war. And yet, it is here that a story begins. History often writes itself in moments too quiet for drums. George tucks the cat against his chest and walks back toward the harbour. The city unfolds around them, rickshaw wheels creaking, vendors calling, temple bells echoing faintly. To the cat, it is the rhythm of a world he has always known. But ahead lies something entirely different. The sea, vast and indifferent, and a ship that will soon carry them both into the mouth of history. The harbour is alive with movement. Junks with their red sails drift alongside hulking merchant vessels. Naval ships lie anchored, grey silhouettes against the shifting tide. Among them is HMS Amethyst, her decks quiet now but destined soon for turmoil. George boards her, carrying the stray in his arms. The cat's nose twitches. His body tenses at the smell of oil, paint, and salt water. The air here is different, heavy with iron, with machinery, with the hum of engines sleeping but ready to wake. A few sailors glance over, eyebrows raised. "What have you got there, George?" One calls. George smiles faintly. "Company," he replies. They laugh at first. The cat is so scrawny, his ears nicked, his tail thin. He looks nothing like the sleek mascot sometimes kept aboard ships. But George insists. He sets the cat down gently on the deck, and the creature pads forward, sniffing, tail low but curious. The men watch. They expect him to bolt, to vanish back into the world of streets and shadows. But he doesn't. He stays. There is something in the way Simon, for he will soon be named, lingers that suggests a choice has been made. Cats rarely give themselves easily. They are not owned, only trusted. And in this moment, the stray begins to trust a world larger than alleys. Below deck, the ship hums with life. Hammocks swing, boots clatter, voices echo in narrow corridors. The air smells of tobacco smoke and bread gone stale. It is a strange symphony of survival, of men far from home trying to make steel feel like shelter. Into this world Simon steps, silent but unafraid. His paws touch steel. His whiskers brush canvas. His ears catch the rumble of laughter and the sigh of exhaustion. Everything is new, overwhelming. Yet in the gaze of the sailor who lifted him, he finds a thread of safety. George makes him a bed from an old towel in a corner of the mess. It is not much, but for Simon it is everything. For the first time, the ground beneath him is steady, the air warm, the food assured. He curls into the cloth, tucking his nose beneath his tail, and sleeps deeply, a kind of sleep he has never known. That night, as the ship rocks gently against the tide, Simon dreams. not of alleys and hunger, but of something different. The sound of voice is not hostile but kind. The smell of food he does not have to steal. The rhythm of footsteps that do not chase but pass by with indifference or care. He is no longer nameless. In the quiet, the sailors begin calling him Simon, a name soft enough to suit his size, strong enough to mark his presence. And so, a bond forms, slowly, gently, like a rope thrown across a widening sea. Simon belongs nowhere but everywhere, to the alley that shaped him, to the sailor who lifted him, and now to the ship that carries him. Belonging, after all, is not always grand. Sometimes it begins with a single hand offering shelter, a single gesture of recognition. Outside, the harbour lights glow against the water. Hong Kong's noise drifts across the waves, but aboard HMS Amethyst, another rhythm takes hold. The men have gained a cat, though they do not yet know how much he will mean to them. And Simon, once astray, has gained a crew. Belonging is not always immediate. Trust must be built. But tonight, on a warship anchored in foreign waters, the first threads are already weaving, and history, ever patient, leans closer. And so the stray sleeps on steel, no longer an alley ghost, but a sailor in waiting, his small heartbeat already echoing with the footsteps of men who will soon call him comrade. The sea has its own heartbeat, a rhythm that hums through iron and timber alike. A ship is never truly silent. Even at rest, it creaks, sighs, and shudders as though it breathes. For a cat, it is a strange world. Steel beneath the paws instead of earth, walls that move with the tides, air that tastes of salt and oil. Simon, still small, still lean from his days in the alley, finds himself wandering the hidden veins of HMS Amethyst. The upper decks are bright with sun and wind, but below is where the life of the ship gathers. It is where sailors sling hammocks in crowded rows, where the kitchen smells of bread gone stale and tea brewed strong, where voices echo in narrow corridors like memories reluctant to fade. The lower decks are also where shadows leave, and in those shadows other creatures thrive. Rats. Bold, lean, and clever in their own way, they move like currents beneath the notice of men, chewing grain, gnawing ropes, slipping through cracks the human eye never sees. For sailors, they are nuisance and danger alike. Thieves of supplies, carriers of disease, reminders of the sea's unclean corners. Into this world walks Simon. At first, the men laugh. He is too small, too thin. His fur still uneven from hunger. That scrap won't scare a rat, one says with a chuckle. Another tosses him a crust of bread, which he ignores, his eyes fixed instead on a flicker of movement by the storeroom wall. There is something in his gaze that silences the laughter for a moment. Something sharp, purposeful. But the moment passes, and the men return to their cards, their talk, their smoke curling in lazy spirals toward the ceiling. Simon waits. He does not stalk like a kitten playing at war. He crouches low, ears flat, tail still, muscles coiled with quiet discipline. His whiskers twitch once, twice. Then the leap. A blur of fur, a squeal, the thud of small bodies colliding. When he emerges, it is with his first victory clamped between his jaws. The laughter dies altogether. The sailors watch as he carries his prize away with a dignity that surprises them, almost ceremonial. He does not meow for praise. He does not strut. He simply disappears into shadow again, a small sentinel doing his work. And when he returns to curl into his towel bed, his sides rising and falling with slow breaths, something has shifted. The men do not see a stray anymore. They see potential. Life below deck is harsh. The air is heavy, the ceilings low. Sailors leave pressed against one another, their privacy measured in inches, their comfort always temporary. Hammocks sway with the sea, and a man's rest is as uncertain as the weather. Simon weaves through this world, silent as mist, stepping over boots, slipping beneath swinging canvas. Some men begin to reach down absent-mindedly, scratching his head as he passes. Others drop bits of food, scraps of fish, drippings from a plate. Slowly, almost without noticing, the crew begins to make space for him. But it is in the storerooms that Simon becomes more than a companion. The ship carries supplies meant to last weeks. Flour, rice, tins of meat. Rats see these as treasure, and left unchecked, they would feast as kings. The men know this well. In the silence of night, they sometimes hear the scuttle of tiny claws, the tearing of sacks, the squeak of brazen thieves. It gnaws at morale as much as at food. Simon takes it as his calling. He prowls the storerooms with the patience of a shadow. His body may be small, but hunger has sharpened him into something precise. One by one, he claims his victories. Sometimes the men find him stretched beside his catch, eyes half-lidded in satisfaction. Other times, they hear the scuffle and thump, but see only the aftermath. Fewer rats, quieter nights. The laughter shifts. Now it is not mockery but admiration. He's a proper ship's cat, that one. A sailor murmurs. Another nods. Worth his weight in gold. For sailors, a ship's cat is more than pest control. It is a kind of talisman, a living spirit against the loneliness of sea and steel. And Simon, though so new, begins to carry that role with quiet gravity. He curls on men's chests as they write letters, their pens scratching out words of longing to wives and children. He sits beside them during meals, a silent guest at the table. He slips into hammocks, pressing warmth against bodies chilled by the damp. The lower decks change because of him. Where once shadows belonged only to rats and the wariness of men, they now hold a small, steady presence, a cat who asks for little but gives more than any measure could calculate. Still, life aboard is not gentle. The sea is unpredictable. Storms toss the ship until hammocks swing like pendulums and men stagger through corridors like drunks. Engines roar, orders are barked, the smell of oil grows thick. Through it all, Simon remains unshaken. He prowls, he hunts, he sleeps, he purrs. He belongs, in a way both simple and profound. George Hickenbottom watches him with quiet pride. It was George's hand that lifted him from shadow, but it is Simon's own strength that earns him a place among the crew. There is no pity in it now, only respect. The men begin to speak of him in their letters. We've got a little mascot now. One writes home, a cat who thinks himself braver than half the crew. Another adds, he keeps the rats at bay, but truth told, he keeps our spirits too. Across oceans, in kitchens and parlours far from the Yangtze River, families smile at the thought of this unlikely sailor. Simon grows, but not into sleekness. He keeps a certain scruff, a reminder of alleys and hunger, and perhaps that is what makes him beloved. He is no ornament, no pampered pet. He is kin to the sailors themselves, survivors roughened by life yet holding steady. Below deck, by the flicker of lantern light, he prowls. The men trust him now, not just with their food, but with their hearts. They have seen him turn laughter into silence, doubt into faith. Each rat chased, each purr shared, is a stitch in the fragile fabric of morale. For in a ship bound for war, hope must be built in small, quiet ways. And sometimes it is built by paws no larger than a child's hand. And as Simon curls into sleep, belly full from his quiet victories, the sailors watch with softened eyes, not yet knowing that in days to come, this small hunter will face battles fiercer than rats, and that his courage will grow alongside their own. The ship is never silent, even in the hush of night, when the sea lies smooth and the stars are spread like lanterns across the dark. The heartbeat of the HMS Amethyst thrums steadily, the creak of timbers, the sigh of rope, the soft breathing of men in hammocks strung close as vines in a dense jungle. It is in this world, this half-floating, half-breathing city of men, that Simon, the once stray cat of Hong Kong's alleys, grows into something more. At first, he is a curiosity. The sailors laugh at the sight of his awkward leaps and thin body, ribs showing beneath fur roughened by street fights and hunger. They call him names, half in jest. Scrap of fluff, shadow tail, rat bait, but slowly, day by day, the humour softens into fondness. For Simon does not simply survive here. He listens. He watches. He knows the rhythms of men, their moods and their silences. When the hammocks sway in the dim light of lanterns, Simon chooses his resting place carefully. He leaps with a soft precision, landing on the chest of a weary sailor, curling into the shallow rise and fall of breath. His purr is steady, almost like a lullaby, a sound that seems to melt the weight from their shoulders. To one sailor, he is a reminder of the farm cat left behind in Devon. To another, he is a thread of warmth in the long absence of children who wait far away in Liverpool or Portsmouth. He is not family, not in the way of blood, but in the loneliness of sea and war, Simon becomes kin. Letters home begin to carry his name. Wives, mothers, sweethearts receive folded papers that smell faintly of tobacco and salt, and inside, in ink that trembles from the sway of the ship, are lines that mention a small black and white cat. "We have a mascot now," one sailor writes. "Keeps the rats away and keeps our spirits up too. Name's Simon, you'd like him. He knows when you're down." Across oceans, in kitchens and parlours, women smile at the thought of this unexpected companion, a creature who makes the distance between ship and shore feel just a little shorter. For men whose days are stitched together with duty drills and the monotony of sea, Simon is something different, a break in the pattern. He prowls the deck during inspection, tail high, earning grins that no officer can forbid. He curls on piles of rope or wedges himself into the crook of an arm during card games, watching with unblinking eyes as if he too were calculating odds. When the galley fills with steam and the smell of boiling potatoes, Simon is there, nosing at crumbs, bold enough now to beg but never so brazen as to overstep. He listens in silence when the men talk. This, perhaps, is his truest gift. For sailors' lives are heavy with unspoken burdens, fear of what waits beyond the horizon, longing for faces unseen, memories of battles fought and friends lost. Words, when they come, spill out unevenly, sometimes angry, sometimes tender. A man may confess to a cat what he would never admit to another soul, and Simon, patient and unjudging, receives it all. His purr fills the gaps where words fail. In time, even the officers notice. Not all ships allow such creatures to roam free, but here, aboard Amethyst, the cat's presence becomes something necessary, something binding. Discipline holds the men in order, Simon holds them in spirit. He is the thread between laughter and silence, between home and exile. There are small rituals now, little signs of his place among them. A saucer of milk kept aside from rations, a corner of a blanket folded where he likes to sleep, a name spoken softly before lights out, as if to ensure he too is accounted for. He has moved from stray to symbol, from alley wanderer to shipmate. Yet there is something more subtle at play, something history too often forgets: the companionship of animals in war. They are never the commanders, never the ones whose names appear in reports, but they remind soldiers and sailors alike of gentleness, of the quiet beating of life against the noise of conflict. A dog by a trench, a bird in a cage, a cat below deck. Each is a reminder of the world beyond the reach of battle. Simon becomes this for Amethyst. He is proof that softness can exist beside steel, that affection can dwell alongside duty. One evening, as the sea glows faintly silver beneath the moon, Simon sits at the bow, eyes fixed on the horizon. A young sailor joins him, leaning on the rail. His voice is low, almost a whisper. "What do you think, eh? Will we see home again?" Simon does not answer, of course. Yet the cat presses close, tail flicking against the sailor's arm, and in that gesture lies a wordless reassurance. For a moment, the sailor smiles, and the long ache of distance eases. Weeks fold into months, and the bond deepens. To outsiders, he may still seem a mere mascot, but to the men who sail with him, Simon is more. He is continuity, he is presence. When the waves rise high and the ship pitches like a toy, Simon clings and endures, showing in his small frame the same resilience demanded of men. When the calm returns, he sprawls in the sun, eyes half closed, reminding them that rest, too, is part of survival. It is said that a ship becomes a world unto itself, a floating fragment of humanity cut loose from land. And in this small world, Simon is both anchor and sail, holding them steady, lifting them forward. His friendship is wordless, but it carries weight. And so the once scrawny cat becomes part of the letters of history. Not in the grand strategies or official communique, but in the laughter of men far from home, in the warmth that seeps into weary bones, in the knowledge that even here, on a vessel of iron and duty, tenderness has not been lost. And yet, the sea is never still for long. Beyond calm waters and gentle nights, storms of another kind are gathering, storms that no purr can quiet, storms that will test both men and cat alike. The friendship of crew and feline holds steady, but soon the Amethyst will sail into danger, and Simon's courage will be measured in shadows far darker than these peaceful decks. The river at dawn is deceptively calm. April 20th, 1949. The Yangtze, wide and shimmering, mirrors the rising sun like a ribbon of fire stretched across China. The civil war between nationalists and communists has torn the country into halves, and yet the river, ancient and unhurried, flows as though it knows no sides, no politics. It carries fishing boats, floating reeds, driftwood, and, on this day, a British warship with steel sides and wary men, HMS Amethyst. The ship moves steadily upriver, her engines thudding with measured rhythm. She is bound for Nanking to relieve the guard ship HMS Consort, a routine duty on paper. But every sailor on board knows the truth. There is no routine in a war zone. The communist forces hold the north bank, the nationalists cling to the south. Guns glint along the riverbanks like teeth waiting. And still the ship sails forward, her Union Jack unfurled, as though a flag alone could keep danger at bay. The men try to distract themselves with duty, checking lines, tightening bolts, sweeping decks. They sip their tea with hands that tremble just slightly more than usual. Each knows the fragility of the moment, The air carries that sharp, metallic stillness before a storm. Even the river seems to hold its breath. Somewhere in the maze of lower decks, Simon prowls. The young ship's cat has grown into himself. Sleeker now, his muscles taut from months of hunting rats and pacing the steel corridors. His whiskers twitch at every rattle and creak. To him, the ship is a living world of echoes, smells, and hidden corners. He leaps lightly onto a crate of supplies, tail flicking as he watches the sailors hurry by. Their nervous energy unsettles him, though he cannot name it. Instinct tells him something is coming. Above, the officers gather on the bridge. Lieutenant Commander Bernard Skinner, commanding officer of Amethyst, stands with binoculars raised, scanning the riverbanks. A thin haze rises from the shore where artillery is dug in, concealed behind brush and mud walls. The guns are not firing, not yet. Diplomacy, perhaps, holds them silent, but silence is fragile when weapons wait in ambush. By mid-morning, the fragile stillness shatters. From the northern shore, a flash, then another. The air splits with the thunder of artillery. The first shell strikes the river, sending up a geyser of water taller than a mast. The second slams into the hull of Amethyst with a deafening roar. Steel screams, wood splinters, and men are flung from their feet. The Yangtze has become a battlefield. Chaos erupts. The ship lurches, her decks alive with shouting men. Shell after shell rains down, a storm of iron tearing across the river. On the lower decks, Simon bolts, ears flattened, as explosions shudder through the hole. He darts between legs and swinging hammocks, seeking cover in a narrow passageway. Smoke seeps downward, acrid and choking. Above him, men scramble to stations. Gunners rush to their posts, though their weapons can scarcely match the hidden batteries lining the riverbank. The Amethyst is caught in a trap, a steel target pinned in a narrow channel. Shells crash into the bridge. Commander Skinner falls, mortally wounded, his blood staining the deck where orders had been given only moments before. Leadership falters, then shifts to First Lieutenant Geoffrey Weston, who must seize command in the midst of fire and death. The ship groans as another shell tears into her side, ripping open compartments below deck. Water floods in, cold and merciless. Men fight not only the enemy's guns, but the river itself, plugging holes with anything they can find, shoving mattresses, wood, and desperate cloth against the gashes in her hull. Amid the chaos, Simon emerges again. Instinct drives him low and fast across the deck. His small body weaves past fallen tools and shards of steel. Sailors glance at him, startled, the little cat still alive in the hail of fire. To some, it is a strange comfort. If even Simon survives, perhaps they will too. The noise is unrelenting. Each explosion hammers bone and chest, a rhythm of destruction that feels endless. The air grows thick with smoke, oil, and blood. Men cry out for medics, for water, for mothers who will never hear their voices again. Hours drag like lifetimes. The guns do not cease. The Amethyst is battered, her decks scarred with fire, her crew reduced to a fraction. Corpses are carried below, wrapped quickly in canvas, prayers whispered even as shells keep falling, and still the ship endures, stubborn against the river of fire. Simon, in the heart of it, adapts as he always has. Once he was a stray in the alleys of Hong Kong, darting from danger with silent paws. Now he is a sailor caught in the thunder of artillery, and yet he holds steady. In the sick bay, where wounded men lie groaning, he appears suddenly, curling beside one of them, pressing his warmth into broken ribs. A man smiles weakly through bloodied lips. "Good lad, Simon," he whispers. The purr begins, low and steady, even as the guns outside roar. By afternoon, the ship is crippled. Engines falter, steering shudders. The Amethyst runs aground on a mud bank near Rose Island, immobile under relentless fire. For hours she lies stranded, smoke pouring from her, casualties mounting. The river around her boils with shrapnel and spray. At last, as evening creeps across the water, the guns fall silent. The Amethyst, battered and broken, lies scarred in the stillness that follows slaughter. The cost is staggering, dozens dead, many more wounded. Her captain gone, her hull torn, yet she still floats, and within her, small breaths, human and feline alike, still endure. Simon, smeared with soot and trembling from exhaustion, slinks back into the galley. His paws leave tiny prints across the scorched deck. The men who see him feel a flicker of something they thought lost: resilience. The little cat does not understand war, but he understands survival. He has carried it from alley to ocean, and tonight, amid devastation, he carries it still. The Yangtze flows on, its waters stained with memory. The battle will be recorded in reports, debated in Parliament, mourned in families far away. But within the steel belly of Amethyst, the story is quieter. A ship struck down yet unbroken, a crew bloodied yet alive, and a cat whose whiskers quiver in the silence after thunder. Night falls over the river of fire. The stars return, distant and indifferent, shining as they always have above the wars of men. The sailors lie where they can, cradling wounds, whispering prayers. Some close their eyes and think of home. Others stare at the ceiling, unable to sleep, listening for the sound of guns that might resume at any moment. And somewhere in the darkness, Simon curls himself into a ball, his small chest rising and falling, a living ember of persistence in a world of ash. This day has changed them all. The men know it, though they do not yet know how long their ordeal will last. And the cat, though he cannot name courage, embodies it with each breath he takes in the shadows of steel. And so the river burns itself into memory. Fire on water, smoke on sky, courage on trembling paws. Yet amid the silence after battle, one question lingers softly: how many lives can be spent for one? The ship lies wounded on the mudbank of the Yangtze, her steel sides cracked and bleeding. Smoke still coils upward from torn decks, carrying with it the smell of gunpowder and scorched paint. The guns on shore have grown quiet, but silence here does not mean peace. It means aftermath. It means counting the living, tending the broken, and grieving the dead. In the dim corridors below deck, where lanterns flicker against steel walls, a different kind of battle is fought. Not of bullets, but of breath. The sick bay overflows with men struck by shrapnel, bullets, fire. Stretcher after stretcher lines the narrow space, each bearing a body that twitches, moans, or falls still. The ship's surgeon moves among them like a weary angel, his hands red, his eyes clouded by exhaustion. He has no time to think, no space to feel. There is only the next wound, the next life to save, the next chance to delay death. And then, amid the groans and gasps of sailors, comes a different sound, a faint, broken mule. Simon has been carried in by a sailor who found him sprawled in a corner of the deck, half hidden beneath splintered wood. His fur, once sleek, is clotted with blood and soot. Shrapnel has torn into his flank, leaving a cruel gash. His breathing is shallow, erratic. To anyone else, it might have seemed foolish, tending to a cat when men lay dying all around. But the sailor insists. "He's one of us," he whispers hoarsely. "He's crew." The surgeon, face lined with disbelief and fatigue, hesitates only a moment. His hands, shaking from stitching men, now turn to the smaller frame before him. He cleans the wound as best he can, the smell of antiseptic mixing with the metallic tang of blood. The needle pierces fur and flesh, thread pulling fragile skin back into place. The surgeon works gently, almost reverently, as though this small life deserves the same dignity as the larger ones he has fought for. Around him, men glance over silent. Some smile faintly, others bow their heads. Simon does not cry out. His body trembles, his eyes flutter, but he endures. And then, as the final stitch is tied, his chest rises with a deeper breath. Against the weight of pain, against the odds of chance, the ship's cat leaves. Whispers ripple through the sick bay. 9 lives, someone mutters. He's already spent one. Another nods, adding softly, "He's tougher than the lot of us." In the dim light, with death close at hand, hope flickers in unlikely form, not from guns or orders, but from a wounded animal stitched together and still breathing. Simon rests in a makeshift bed fashioned from a torn naval jacket. His paws twitch as though chasing something in a dream, perhaps a rat, perhaps only the shadows of memory. Men pass by and pause, lowering their hands to stroke his soot-darkened fur. For a moment, the horrors outside the bulkheads recede, replaced by the steady rhythm of a small heartbeat. Above, the river continues to flow, carrying with it the echoes of cannon fire. The Amethyst lies trapped, her crew cut down, her captain gone. But in the belly of the ship, life clings stubbornly. The men marvel at it, that in a place where steel splits and men fall, this fragile creature survives. They tell themselves it means something, even if they cannot name what. Perhaps it is courage. Perhaps it is luck. Perhaps it is a message that survival, however improbable, is still possible. As night folds itself across the river, Simon stirs. His eyes, clouded but open, meet the gaze of a sailor watching over him. The man, his own arm bandaged and stiff, whispers, "Rest easy, lad. You've done more than your share." The cat does not answer, but his faint purr returns, like the murmur of a prayer. In the hours that follow, the wounded drift in and out of sleep. Some dream of home, of fields and gardens untouched by war. Others dream of nothing at all. Yet when nightmares seize them, there is often the brush of fur, the warmth of a small body pressed against their side. Simon, stitched and battered, limps from hammock to hammock, giving comfort where he can. Pain has not robbed him of his instinct to soothe. His presence calms men who otherwise cannot close their eyes. A purr, fragile though it is, fills the air like a hymn against despair. Days pass, though the memory of that first bombardment hangs heavy. Supplies dwindle, water tastes of rust. The wounded groan, the uninjured toil endlessly to keep the ship afloat. Hope flickers and dims, flares again, dims once more. Through it all, Simon continues to move, slower now, but determined. He eats little, drinks sparingly, and spends his strength where it matters most, at the side of men who feel forgotten. And so the whispers grow. He's one of us. He's Abel Seacat. He's spent a life, but he's got 8 more. They do not laugh when they say it. They mean it. In him, they see resilience, survival, a refusal to yield even when the river itself seems to conspire against them. For the ship's surgeon, Simon becomes a reminder too. Each time he passes the little bundle of patched fur, he remembers why he keeps working, why he must not give up, even as his hands ache and his spirit tires. If a cat can endure torn flesh and smoke-choked lungs, then so can a sailor. If 9 lives can be spared for one, perhaps 1 life can be spared for 9. The Yangtze glitters at sunset, the waters stained with reflections of fire. Inside the amethyst, men whisper, eat in silence, mend their wounds. And Simon, lying now on a folded blanket, blinks slowly, his golden eyes catching the light. He has become more than a cat. He has become proof that life can survive where death has walked. And so the little sailor sleeps, stitched together by human hands, guarded by whispered hope. Yet the river outside grows hungrier, the shadows longer, and soon the siege begins. The Yangtze has turned from a river of passage into a prison. HMS Amethyst, scarred and battered from the shelling, rests stranded on a mud bank near Rose Island. Her hull is torn, her bridge shattered, and her crew reduced by death and injury. For days she cannot move forward nor back. Around her the river flows freely, a mocking reminder that nature knows nothing of sieges or borders. The guns on the banks are silent now, but their presence is felt in every heartbeat. Communist forces line the northern shore, watchful and armed, waiting for the ship to falter or surrender. The crew leaves under their gaze, each movement shadowed by the knowledge that an order to fire could come again at any moment. In this tense silence, survival takes on a different form, slower, grimmer, more relentless. The first enemy to press its advantage is not the artillery, but hunger. The galley, once a place of chatter and steaming tea, falls quiet. Supplies dwindle quickly, eaten or ruined in the chaos of battle. Bread hardens into stone. Water grows scarce and foul-tasting. Each ration must be measured with painful precision. Sailors who once filled their plates now scrape crumbs and swallow with difficulty, their bodies growing thinner as the days stretch on. Hunger is a cruel companion, whispering at all hours, sapping strength and hope alike. The second enemy follows close behind. Rats. They were always present, lurking in the shadows of storerooms and scuttling in the dark corners of the lower decks. But now, with food scarce and the ship crippled, they grow bold. They invade the galley, gnaw at the meagre supplies, and creep across hammocks where sailors try to sleep. Their squeaks echo through the steel corridors, a nightly reminder that even here, in a vessel armed with guns, nature finds a way to mock the efforts of men. For the crew, each rat becomes a symbol of their despair, an intruder, a thief, a shadow feeding on their weakness. And for Simon, they become his calling. Wounded though he is, stitched along his side where shrapnel cut deep, Simon rises to the challenge. Pain slows him, but instinct drives him forward. He prowls the storerooms with low, steady steps, his whiskers brushing along the steel walls. His eyes gleam in the lantern light as he waits, poised between stillness and sudden motion. Then a strike, swift, decisive. A rat falls, and with it, a measure of hope returns to the sailors. Day after day, night after night, Simon continues his patrols. His small body weaves through the ship's corridors, appearing suddenly where the crew least expects him. The galley, the storerooms, even the captain's quarters. Each time, a rat in his jaws or the evidence of another victory left for the men to see. He does not ask for praise, but the sailors give it freely. They cheer his catches, stroke his fur, whisper thanks as though he were a comrade carrying his share of the burden. The ship's log notes enemy positions, casualties, weather and tides. But among the men, it is Simon's victories that are recorded in memory. Able Sea Cat Simon. They begin to call him half in jest, half in reverence. The title spreads through the decks, carried in letters written home, in stories whispered during the long nights. Yet the siege is not only physical, it seeps into the soul. Isolation presses on the crew like a weight. They are cut off from the world beyond the river, unable to send word or receive it. News comes only in fragments, carried by rumour or by the sight of distant movement on the shore. Time itself becomes uncertain. Days blur together, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun across the water. In such silence, despair grows. Men pace restlessly, replaying the battle in their minds, wondering if rescue will ever come. Some write letters they cannot send. Others sit in silence, staring at the river's endless current, imagining home. Morale phrase like rope left too long in the rain. And, in these darkest moments, Simon's presence becomes more than practical. He is not only a hunter of rats, but a guardian of spirit. When a sailor lies awake, hungry and hollow, Simon curls on his chest, his purr resonating like a lullaby against ribs. When fear seizes the sick bay, he appears among the wounded, pressing warmth into bandaged arms. His very survival after shrapnel and stitching is a reminder life can endure even where death lingers. The surgeon who once stitched Simon's torn flesh with wary hands remarks quietly that the cat does more for morale than any medicine he can provide. Others agree. The crew begins to speak of Simon as if he carries more than 9 lives. As though each life he spends buys another day of hope for them all. The siege grinds on. Negotiations between the British and the communist forces stall. Attempts to move the ship fail. Every day is a test of patience, endurance, and will. The river reflects the sky with deceptive beauty, its surface calm while beneath tension coils tight as rope. One evening, as the sun dips low and the sky burns orange, Simon makes his way to the deck. He sits at the edge, tail wrapped around his paws, gazing across the water. Sailors gather near, silent, watching him watch the river. In that stillness, it feels as though he is not merely a cat, but a sentinel, keeping vigil over them all. His small form against the vast river seems almost holy, a reminder that even the smallest life can stand watch against despair. Stories grow around him, as they always do in times of hardship. Some say he senses when shells will fall, though the guns have stayed silent for now. Others claim he can find rats no man can see. A few whisper, half believing, that he has already died once and returned, proof that his 9 lives are real. These stories, embroidered in the quiet hours, knit the crew together. They give shape to hope in a time when hope is scarce. Weeks slip into months. The siege becomes a way of life, endured with teeth clenched and spirits dim. Yet within the grey weight of each day, Simon continues his patrols, his comfort, his quiet defiance. He is tireless, though his wounds ache. He is steady, though the world around him trembles. And so, the Amethyst, though wounded and cornered, does not fall entirely to despair. For amid hunger, fear, and shadow, one small creature carries resilience in his paws, reminding men that not all battles are fought with guns. Some are fought in silence, with fur and purrs, with patience against the dark. And so the siege settles heavy upon the Amethyst, her men caught between hunger and hope, fear and faith. Yet in the silence of the river's gaze, a little captain of the lower decks begins to rise. The Amethyst rests like a scarred body upon the Yangtze, its steel frame dented by the wounds of battle. Around her the river flows as if nothing has changed, broad, brown, and eternal. indifferent to the quarrels of men and the cries of nations. Yet within her hull, life has narrowed to a fragile rhythm, survival measured not in triumphs, but in small victories. Every mouthful of food, every drop of clean water, every heartbeat spared from despair carries a weight heavier than cannon fire. In such times, heroes often rise not in grand gestures, but in humble persistence. And among the battered crew of the Amethyst, none bore that mantle more quietly, more steadfastly than Simon. The lower decks had become his kingdom. Where light scarcely reached and air grew thick with damp, Simon padded with quiet authority. His eyes gleamed in the half-dark like lanterns, guiding the crew through hardship. In storerooms where sacks of grain sagged and barrels creaked, he became both guard and sentinel. Rats, sensing opportunity in the ship's wounded stillness, had multiplied in boldness. They slipped through cracks, gnawed at ropes, and darted across shadowed corridors as though the Amethyst herself had been surrendered to them. But Simon did not yield. He hunted with patience, not frenzy. Each stalk and pounce carried a precision born of instinct yet sharpened by circumstance. To the crew, the sound of his claws against metal, followed by the brief silence of pursuit, was reassurance itself. Where rats had once mocked their hunger and threatened their stores, now they fell back, harried and broken by a creature no larger than a man's boot. Word spread quickly among the men. Simon had cleared one storeroom, then another. Food that might have been spoiled remained untouched. Grain that might have bred sickness stayed safe. In those dim corridors, Simon fought a war of his own. And he fought it well. The sailors, gaunt from rationing and weary from the siege, began to notice how his presence lifted the air. Able Seacat Simon, one man muttered with a smile after finding a rat sprawled lifeless where Simon had left it. The name stuck, repeated with a mix of affection and reverence. It was no mere joke. On a ship where rank defined survival, to grant a title was to grant honor. Simon was no longer a mascot, nor even just a lucky charm. He had become one of them, bound by duty as surely as the men who manned the guns. And yet Simon's command extended beyond his claws. There was a gentleness to his service, a quiet comfort in his nearness. When the men returned from tense hours at their stations, it was Simon who brushed against their boots, who curled beside their legs, who blinked slowly as though reminding them that calm was still possible even in the belly of war. In silence, he shared his warmth, and in sharing it, he drew theirs back to the surface. It is often said that armies march on their stomachs. That morale is as vital as ammunition. In the siege of the Amethyst, morale often balanced on a whisker's edge. And so, Simon's work carried more weight than any might measure. He was captain of the lower decks, yes, but also custodian of spirit, keeper of a fragile flame that refused to go out. The men began to leave scraps for him, precious morsels from their own limited rations, a spoonful of rice, a sliver of dried fish. To share with Simon was to affirm their own humanity, to remember that generosity was not extinct within the shadow of scarcity. He ate sparingly, never greedy, as though he too understood the balance of survival. One night, a sailor sat alone in the dim mess, his head bent low in grief. He had received word of a brother killed in battle far from the river's banks. No words could soften that kind of blow. The river flowed on, indifferent. But Simon padded softly across the floor, leaped into the man's lap, and pressed his small body against the grief. There, for a brief time, the sailor wept not alone, but in the presence of a companion who asked nothing, demanded nothing, but gave all the same. The legend of able sea cat Simon grew not from tales shouted aloud, but from whispers carried between wary men. In the hush of the night watch, one would murmur how Simon had stood poised upon a beam, watching over them as if keeping guard. Another would recall the way Simon batted aside a rat that dared to crawl too near the dwindling stores. Each story added another stitch to the tapestry of his place aboard, until his name was spoken with the same gravity as any officer's. In time, Simon's whiskers came to symbolize something larger than his own battles. They became a banner of resilience, fluttering invisibly through the ship. Where guns had failed and supplies had faltered, Simon's quiet defiance reminded them that not all was lost, that survival was possible, even in siege. There is something timeless in such small victories. History often writes itself in sweeping arcs of generals and kings, but in truth, survival in war often rests upon the humbler shoulders of those who guard the unseen corners of endurance. A single cat, moving with silent grace through the belly of a ship, can hold despair at bay more effectively than speeches or flags. So Simon walked his kingdom, tireless, steady. The sailors saluted him with smiles, the kind reserved for comrades who had earned their place not by decree, but by devotion. He was no longer a creature of chance, plucked from the alleys of Hong Kong. He was a sailor, a shipmate, a little captain of the lower decks. And yet, even the bravest captains must rest, and even the fiercest guardians cannot fight shadows forever. As the days of siege stretched long, the Amethyst would soon face new trials, not from rats, but from the gnawing hunger within and the uncertainty without. In that silence, another kind of courage would be asked of them all. The Yangtze River flows dark and heavy outside the battered hull of HMS Amethyst. Days blur into nights, and nights into days. The ship caught between the banks of war and the currents of despair. Hunger gnaws at the sailors. Wounds fester in the damp air. Letters from home go unanswered, for there is no way to send them past the siege that holds them captive. Morale, once held aloft by duty, begins to sink like anchor chains into the river's depth, and in this gloom a cat moves quietly. Simon, scarred now from shrapnel and smoke, carries himself with a dignity far beyond his size. He slips between bunks, his paws noiseless on the steel. His green eyes catch the lantern light, reflecting not fear, but a kind of steady companionship. To some, he is a hunter still, guardian of the ship's stores, but to many, he has become something else entirely, a quiet keeper of spirits. When the day's labour is done, when men return to their hammocks with shoulders slumped and faces hollow, Simon does not hunt rats. Instead, he leaps onto chests and knees, curling into the curve of an arm or the hollow of a rib cage. His purr rumbles low and steady, a vibration felt more than heard. In that sound something shifts, pain eases. Eyes close more gently. Worry softens at its edges. The sailors, hardened men who speak little of fear, begin to murmur to him in the half-light. They whisper confessions no officer will hear, of children left behind in Portsmouth, of wives waiting on distant shores, of doubts that courage alone cannot still. To Simon they unburden hearts too heavy for silence. And the little cat listens, his tail twitching once, his purr unwavering, as though the weight of their sorrow can be absorbed into his small, steadfast body. There is something ancient in this exchange, the way humans have always looked into animal eyes and found reflection, not judgment, In a time before warships and rifles, men sat by fires with dogs at their feet, oxen in the fields, cats in barns keeping the grain safe. Companions through every chapter of history, animals have borne witness to the quiet moments of human frailty. Now, on the steel belly of a trapped warship, that old story continues, carried on whiskers and fur. Some evenings, Simon climbs onto the bunk of a sailor, too wounded to move. He settles on the man's chest, rising and falling with shallow breaths. Nurses notice that pain seems to dull when the cat is there, fevers easing if only for a while. They do not call it medicine, but they do not question it either. The wounded clutch at Simon as if he is both anchor and sail, holding them steady in the storm and pointing them toward hope. In letters written but unsent, sailors begin to include his name. Simon sleeps at the foot of my hammock, one man scrawls. He is the only one here who does not seem afraid. Another writes, the cat makes us laugh when nothing else can. He climbs where he shouldn't, knocks over cups, and looks at us as though he is captain. Families back home, though unaware of the siege's full terror, come to know this little companion through ink and paper. In homes far from the Yangtze, Simon's presence is already felt. But it is not laughter alone that he brings. It is something subtler, something harder to describe. His purr becomes a kind of prayer, a rhythm that settles the chaos of the mind. In the steel corridors, where prayers to heaven feel unanswered, men find themselves soothed by this creature who asks nothing but offers everything. Hope, it seems, does not always arrive in thunderclaps or speeches. Sometimes it arrives in fur, in a steady heartbeat against the chest. The days of siege stretch endlessly. Supplies dwindle further. Yet the sailors endure, held not only by orders and duty, but by the reminder that even in darkness, comfort is possible. Simon does not fight battles with claws alone. He fights despair, one quiet moment at a time. Historians may write of sieges and escapes, of artillery and tactics. But in these days aboard the Amethyst, history is also written in softer ink, in the warmth of a small body curled against a sailor's side, in the whispered secrets carried only by a cat, in the sound of a purr echoing through narrow corridors like the faint toll of a bell. It is said that soldiers often cling to rituals in war, polishing boots, folding letters, reciting prayers. For the men of the Amethyst, another ritual takes hold. They reach for Simon. They stroke his fur, scratch behind his ears, and feel the world shrink down to something manageable, something tender. He is not merely their Mauser, nor simply a mascot. He is their ritual of hope, and hope in this place is as precious as bread. When the guns beyond the river thunder again, rattling the ship and shaking dust from the beams, Simon does not flee. He crouches low, tail lashing once, but then he remains. To sailors huddled in fear, this steadiness becomes a kind of courage by example. If the cat can endure, so too can they. A small life, standing firm in the storm, teaches larger ones how to hold fast. As the siege stretches on, a bond deepens. Simon is no longer seen as stray or pet. He is crew, as vital as the helmsman at the wheel, the gunner at his post, the surgeon with trembling hands. His name is spoken with respect, not as novelty but as necessity. In the roll call of resilience, Simon's paws march beside them all, and so, amid hunger and fear, the little cat becomes a quiet miracle. Not of survival alone, but of spirit. In his warmth, the sailors remember they are not abandoned. In his purr, they hear something greater than themselves, and in his steady companionship, They find the strength to wait one more day, to endure one more night, until deliverance comes. And as Simon curls himself into the silence of another night, his purr echoing like a low hymn, the sailors begin to dream of freedom. Soon the river will call them again, and in the darkness ahead, a daring escape waits to be written. Night drapes itself over the Yangtze River, heavy and moonless. The waters roll black and restless, the surface broken only by glimmers of faint starlight. For weeks the river has been both cage and gauntlet, keeping HMS Amethyst pinned in place, her crew worn thin by hunger, illness, and unrelenting strain. Every day has been measured in shells and shouts, every night in whispered prayers and the endless waiting. Now, a decision rests upon the shoulders of tired men and the hull of a battered ship. To remain is to wither, to move is to risk everything. The plan is fragile, woven from desperation and necessity. To escape, the Amethyst must slip past heavily fortified batteries that line the riverbanks, Chinese artillery poised like wolves with teeth bared. Each gun is loaded, each soldier waiting for the slightest movement upon the darkened water. The ship has already felt their fury once, steel torn and bodies broken beneath the rain of shells. To tempt fate again is to dance on the edge of oblivion. Yet there is no other path. Within the ship's belly, the men prepare in silence. Orders are given in whispers, hands moving with the precision of ritual. Fires are damped low to dull the glow, lights shrouded, voices hushed. Every clang of metal seems louder than thunder. Every drop tool feels like a shot fired. They know the river will betray them with its own noise, the churn of engines, the splash of wake. But they pray the night will keep them hidden, that shadows may cloak them as allies. Amid this tense quiet, Simon moves as though unaware of fear. He pads along the gangway, tail high, eyes gleaming with reflected lantern light. To some, his presence seems uncanny, as though the cat senses currents invisible to men. He pauses near the feet of sailors bent over their stations, brushing against their boots before moving on. A touch of fur, a reminder of something steady in a world that has become uncertain. Men reach down to stroke him once, almost without thought, as if to anchor themselves in his calm. The hour comes. The engines stir, a low vibration coursing through the steel. The ship groans softly, as though she too knows the peril of the attempt. Slowly, carefully, HMS Amethyst eases into the current, her prow slicing the black water. Above, the sky offers no moon, no mercy, only the promise of concealment. Every eye on deck is fixed ahead, every hand clenched tight around rope or rail. The ship, for all her scars, moves with the dignity of defiance. The first stretch of river passes in silence. No flare splits the sky, no gun roars from the banks. For a heartbeat, the men dare to believe the impossible, that perhaps the enemy sleeps, that perhaps fate has turned kind. But rivers are long and hope fragile. A sudden crack shatters the stillness. A searchlight bursts awake on the shore, its white beam slicing across the dark water like a blade. It sweeps the surface, searching, hunting. The men hold their breath as it passes wide, then swings back closer, closer still. For an instant, the beam brushes the ship's stern, a ghostly hand grazing steel. Hearts hammer. Fingers twitch. Simon crouches low, ears flattened, eyes wide as the beam fades past them and onto empty water. The ship presses forward, carried by both engine and prayer. Then the guns awake. The river explodes with thunder. Shells streak overhead, crashing into the water with fountains of spray, bursting on the banks with furious flame. The air shakes with violence. Steel shudders with each near strike. Men dive to positions, some praying aloud, others cursing, others simply silent. The Amethyst surges onward, her engines pushed to their limits, propellers thrashing the dark water into foam. Simon clings to the deck, body pressed low, tail lashing. His small shape darts between crates and coils of rope as the ship trembles beneath the onslaught. To sailors glancing down at him, his survival feels almost superhuman, a creature so small enduring the same storm of fire as men hardened by war. The captain's orders come clipped, sharp, carrying across the roar.
"Full speed ahead! Hold course!"
The crew obeys, their movements automatic, each man a cog in the desperate machine of survival. The Amethyst answers with determination, steel hull groaning but not giving way, her bow cutting through the chaos with stubborn will. For an eternity, the night becomes fire. Explosions dance along the banks, red and white against the black. Smoke mingles with river mist, cloaking sight, burning lungs. Yet amid the chaos, something remarkable happens. Not every shot strikes true. The darkness confuses aim. The swiftness of the ship frustrates calculation. Shells fall wide, their fury wasted upon water. And so, little by little, the Amethyst inches past death, her wake glowing faint with phosphorescence, her course steady. Men weep openly at their stations, tears streaking through grime and sweat, not from fear, but from the fierce, unbearable weight of endurance. To be alive in this moment feels like a miracle. To survive another minute is gift beyond measure. In the midst of this storm, they glimpse Simon atop a crate, fur ruffled, eyes half closed as though unbothered by the roar. It is madness, and yet it is comfort. If the cat does not falter, neither will they. Hour after hour, the escape continues. The ship moves from one gauntlet to the next, each stretch of river demanding fresh courage. Flares burst above, turning night into day, but the ship presses on. More guns open fire, but distance slowly grows. The farther they travel, the less intense the barrage, until at last the guns fall silent. The echoes linger across the water, fading like storms that rumble away, and then silence. The Amethyst sails on into the darkness, past the ring of fire, past the grasp of death. The men remain frozen in disbelief, as if any sudden cheer might call the guns back upon them. Slowly, realization spreads they are free. The river no longer binds them. A cheer rises, raw and hoarse, then another, until the entire ship erupts with the sound. Men embrace, some laughing, some sobbing, some sinking to their knees with exhaustion. The air tastes of smoke and salt tears. They have done the impossible. Against odds, against reason, they have broken free. And there, amid the celebration, Simon blinks. He sits calmly atop a crate, paws tucked beneath him, eyes surveying the men as though he knew all along that they would endure. To them, he is more than cat now. He is symbol, talisman, comrade. His calmness carries the weight of prophecy fulfilled. That survival was not only possible but inevitable if they held fast together. The ship presses onward, each mile carrying them farther from death, closer to home. The stars emerge faint above the smoke, guiding them forward, whispering of dawn yet to come. And within the steel hull, the sailors lie down at last, some to sleep, some simply to rest their weary bodies against the floor. In their dreams and waking thoughts alike, they hear the faint hum of an engine, the steady lap of river, and perhaps, somewhere close, the soft vibration of a purr. History will remember the escape as daring, as brilliant seamanship, as a feat of courage and defiance. but the men aboard the Amethyst know the truth in their bones. Survival was not only the work of steel and orders, but of spirit, the spirit to endure when endurance seemed impossible. And in that spirit, they will always see Simon, small yet steady, the cat who bore witness and lent courage by presence alone. The river releases them, but it does not forget. Its banks still hold the scars of fire, its waters still carry the memory of blood. Yet for the crew of the Amethyst, this night becomes the turning point, the moment when captivity gave way to freedom. It is the story they will tell for the rest of their lives, to children and grandchildren, to fellow sailors in distant ports. And always, in the telling, a cat will be part of it. And as dawn begins to touch the river with pale light, freedom feels both fragile and eternal. Beyond survival lies another journey, not of danger, but of recognition. For soon, the world itself will learn of a ship and her cat, and a hero's welcome will rise to meet them. Morning unfurls like a flag across the river. For the first time in long weeks, the guns are behind them, their thunder only an echo carried downstream. HMS Amethyst presses on, her hull battered, her decks scarred, yet afloat, alive, unbroken. Men walk the steel with shoulders lightened, some in silence, some humming, some unable to stop smiling. They have passed through the fire and come out the other side. Word of their escape does not remain on the Yangtze. It spreads quickly, first through naval channels, then across the seas, carried in dispatches, headlines, and hurried telegrams. By the time the Amethyst finds her safe harbour, the world already knows her name. And along with it, the name of her smallest, strangest sailor, Simon. The story is irresistible. A warship pinned under siege, a crew brought low, and a cat who fought beside them, who endured wounds and hunger, who kept spirits alive when steel and strategy alone could not. Newspapers seize upon him. Columns that once carried the grim tally of war now make room for whiskers and fur. Able Seacut Simon. The headlines declare, the cat who saved the Amethyst. And so the world, weary of war's weight, finds itself lifted for a moment by a tale of pause and courage. Letters begin to arrive, more than the ship's post bag has ever known. Some addressed to the captain, some to the crew. But many are written simply to Simon, HMS Amethyst. Children scrawl in shaky handwriting, thanking him for being brave. Old sailors write of their own ship cats, companions of voyages long past, now remembered with tears. Families send photographs of their pets, as though Simon will recognize in them a kinship. Gifts follow the letters. Small packages wrapped in brown paper, stuffed with treats, toys, even collars engraved with his name. Some are practical, tins of food, brushes for his fur. Others are whimsical tiny knitted hammocks, embroidered blankets, medals made of brass and ribbon. All carry the same message: gratitude, affection, a sense that the world, for once, wishes to honor something innocent. The sailors, hardened by weeks of fear, find themselves smiling as they sort through the post. They read aloud letters to Simon, holding him on their laps, as if he might understand every word. You are very brave. One child has written, and I hope you get milk every day. The men laugh, but their laughter is soft, tinged with something tender. For they know what Simon endured. They saw the blood on his fur, the stitches trembling in the surgeon's hands, the way he still limped when the wound ached. He is no mascot only, he is their comrade. And now the world knows it too. The Royal Navy, with all its formality and tradition, bends slightly to acknowledge the unusual truth. Simon is awarded the Dickin Medal, the animal's equivalent of the Victoria Cross. The citation speaks of his courage in controlling the rat population despite wounds, of his service in raising morale during the ship's ordeal. To many, the medal may seem light-hearted, even quaint, but to the crew of the Amethyst it feels just. Their smallest sailor has been recognized as one of them, not in jest, but in earnest. Ceremonies await in England, though the journey home is still long. The thought of Simon standing alongside officers and dignitaries, a ribbon on his small chest, seems almost surreal, yet it also feels right. History, which often reserves its applause for kings and admirals, has chosen for once to cheer a creature who asked for nothing and gave everything. In the quiet of the ship, Simon continues as he always has. He prowls the storerooms, curls on hammocks, flicks his tail at teasing fingers. Fame means little to him. He does not read the newspapers, nor care for medals. But the men notice the difference. Where once he was their secret comfort, now he is the world's. Strangers thousands of miles away know his name, care for his fate. In Simon, humanity finds a story it longs to believe, that courage can wear whiskers, that hope can be small and soft-poured, that loyalty need not speak in words. There is, too, something healing in the world's applause. The siege had left scars deeper than steel could show. Many men would carry nightmares of fire and screams, of the river holding them captive. Yet the letters, the gifts, the recognition, these bring light into those shadows. They remind the crew that what they endured is not forgotten, that their suffering has given rise to a story larger than grief. In Simon's name, they find their own honored too. For a time, the cat becomes emblem of resilience, his story passed from sailor to civilian, from mother to child. Newspapers print his photograph, black and white fur, whiskers proud, eyes steady. He looks out from the page with the same calm that once steadied men under fire. People cut out the picture, pin it to walls, carry it in pockets. In pubs and drawing rooms, conversations turn to him, not as a curiosity but as a symbol. If a cat can survive, people say, then so can we. It is easy to underestimate the hunger for such a story. The world has seen too much war. Heroes in uniform are many, but they remind of sacrifice, of loss, of blood spilled. Simon reminds of something else. The gentleness that endures even in carnage. His fame is not about victory in battle, but victory of spirit. He is the reminder that even amid smoke and fire, there is room for purring, for comfort, for love. The men of the Amethyst watch this unfold with quiet pride. They know the world sees only a symbol while they see the truth. The nights he sat with the wounded, the days he patrolled against rats, the way his presence lifted despair. Yet they do not correct the world. Let the world believe what it must, for it is not wrong. Simon is both symbol and reality. He is cat and comrade, myth and memory. Even as honours pile high, Simon remains the same. He stretches in patches of sunlight, naps through the hum of engines, and greets each sailor with the same unassuming familiarity. The medals, the letters, the applause, all these belong more to the men, perhaps, than to him. For Simon, life is now as it was to be present, to offer comfort, to walk with quiet dignity. Yet the sailors know what he represents. He is proof that survival is not merely about endurance of body, but endurance of heart. That in the darkest corridors of history, light can come from the smallest flame. That hope, once carried in pause across a ship, can ripple outward across oceans. And so, When the ship's mail is sorted and another letter addressed to Simon is placed gently aside, the men smile. They know the world applauds him, but they know something deeper still. He belongs to them, to their story, to that terrible and miraculous stretch of river where courage was tested and found not only in men, but in a cat who never abandoned them. And as the applause of the world gathers like a tide, Simon's paws tread quietly toward another chapter. One that will not be fought with shells or fire, but with silence, confinement and waiting, for soon London calls, and with it the test of cages and ceremonies. The sea has always been a place of departures and returns. For centuries, sailors have spoken of it as a living thing, an expanse that both takes and gives, that steals time and yet restores meaning. The men of HMS Amethyst know this intimately. They have sailed through fear, through fire, through the long captivity of the Yangtze, and they have lived to tell of it. Now, at last, the tide carries them homeward, and at their side, small and steadfast, is the figure who has become a legend, Simon, the ship's cat. News of him has already travelled farther than the ship itself. Newspapers carried stories of the Yangtze Incident, but woven into the military dispatches, the charts of movements, the tallies of the dead and wounded, was another story, softer but no less real. A cat who stayed when the shells fell, who comforted the injured, who patrolled the steel decks as if they were his kingdom. Letters arrive from strangers, children scribbling with crayon, mothers writing in neat, careful script, old veterans remembering their own ship cats from wars gone by. Some letters bear only a name on the envelope, for Simon, Amethyst cat, and still they are delivered. When the order comes to sail home, the men cheer is tempered by memory. Home means survival. Home means honor. But for Simon, home means a journey into the unknown. England is not the riverbank of Shanghai, where he once prowled as a half-starved stray. Nor is it the steel corridors of a warship, familiar now with the smells of oil and canvas and men's boots. It is something else. A land of parades and applause, of rules written by people who have never crouched beside him in a wardroom or stroked his fur with a trembling hand after battle. The ship cuts through the waves, each day drawing closer to Portsmouth. The sailors prepare their uniforms, clean their boots, polish brass. They speak of families waiting on the quayside, of pubs and quiet streets, of the taste of bread that is not rationed, buttered thick, still warm from an oven. And always they glance at Simon, half in jest, half in awe. "You'll get more medals than us," one laughs. Another mutters, softer, "You deserve them." But there are laws, and even heroes must bow to them. Britain, still haunted by the memory of plague ships and sick bays, keeps a strict watch on animals entering its harbours. Quarantine is the price. A month or more in confinement, cages lined up in a government station where inspectors ensure no disease slips through with fur or feather. For Simon, who has known hunger and gunfire but never a cage, this will be a different battle. The day arrives. The dock bustles with reporters, with naval officers in gleaming dress uniforms, with families pressing forward to see their loved ones. The band plays, brass notes bright against the salt air. The Amethyst glides in, battered but proud. Her crew stands at attention and high above, in the place he has made his own. Simon peers out, unblinking, regal in his own quiet way. The cheer that rises is not only for the men, it is for him too. Children lift onto their father's shoulders, pointing. There he is, That's the cat. Cameras flash. Journalists scribble notes, already shaping headlines that will travel across the Atlantic. The men smile, and for once, even the hardest of them feel tears sting their eyes. But when the gangway lowers, when men descend to kisses and embraces, Simon does not walk free. Instead, hands reach to carry him to a wooden crate, its sides barred with wire. He resists at first, claws pressing against the deck. The sailors who lift him whisper apologies, stroking his fur, but they cannot change the order. Into the crate he goes, his green eyes wide, his tail flicking. He presses a paw against the wire as if to ask, "After all this freedom, after all this danger, why this?" The crowd gasps when they see him caged. Some mutter disapproval. Others nod solemnly, understanding the law. But the sailors who marched through hell with him feel the moment like a stone in their chests. They know what he has given them: his courage, his companionship, his small, unwavering heartbeat beside their own. To see him shut away now feels cruel, like applauding a hero while chaining him in the same breath. The quarantine station is quiet, far from the cheering harbour. There, animals wait in their pens. Dogs brought home from foreign stations, parrots with clipped wings, even the odd monkey smuggled from a port. And now, among them, Simon. For the first time since his kitten days in Shanghai's alleys, he is alone. No familiar boots thudding down steel passages, no voices calling his name, no ship rocking beneath him like a cradle, just the hum of distant voices and the scrape of claws from cages nearby. The men visit when they can. They bring him bits of cloth from the ship, worn with their scent. They slip their fingers through the wire, letting him rub against them. They speak in low tones, telling him of the medals waiting, of the ceremonies planned, of the world eager to see him honoured. But Simon only blinks, slow and solemn. His purr, when it comes, is softer now, not the steady rumble that once filled the ship's sick bay, but a quieter murmur, as if he saves his strength. And yet, even here, he becomes a symbol. Visitors to the quarantine station ask to see him. Children press their noses against the glass. Reporters write that the nation's bravest cat is waiting behind wire. That patience is demanded before he can step into his role as hero. The irony is sharp, that a creature who braved fire without fear must now wait under lock and key. But perhaps this too is part of his story. Heroes, after all, are not always free. They bear burdens even when small, even when silent. The days stretch on, measured not by the clang of bells or the rising of watches, but by the slow rhythm of waiting. The men return to their families, yet still they come to see him. Some bring small gifts. A saucer painted with his name, a ribbon in navy blue, letters folded and tucked through the cage bars. They promise him that soon it will end, that soon the gates will open, and he will walk again on free ground. And beyond the wire, the world prepares. Medals are polished, speeches are written, invitations are drafted for ceremonies that will name him officially what the sailors already know him to be: a survivor, a shipmate, a hero. In the stillness of his cage, Simon stretches, curls, and dozes. His whiskers twitch in sleep, as if chasing unseen things. Perhaps he dreams of Shanghai, of riverbanks and shadows. Perhaps of the amethyst in moonlight, steel warm beneath his paws. Or perhaps he dreams of nothing at all, content in the moment, as cats so often are. The waiting will not last forever. The tide moves, even when it seems still, and just as the river once released the ship into freedom, so too will these bars open in time. And when they do, the world will not only see a cat, they will see the living echo of endurance itself. Yet even freedom carries its shadows, and the story of Simon, the ship's cat, drifts toward a chapter where applause and silence meet. Quarantine holds its own kind of silence. It is not the hush of reverence, nor the deep quiet of night at sea. It is a silence thick with waiting, with walls that echo no laughter, with footsteps that carry no purpose but to move between cages. For Simon, the ship's cat of the HMS Amethyst, the war has already been fought. The river has been survived, the rats driven back, the guns endured. Yet here, in a sterile room far from the thunder of artillery, his last and most unforgiving battle begins. The laws of the land are clear. Every animal arriving from foreign shores must be confined, examined, and kept away until the authorities are certain disease cannot slip past whiskers or paws. To the officials, Simon is not able sea cat nor hero of the Yangtze. He is simply another creature placed in a narrow pen with food, water, and little else. The sailors who carried him here know this is the rule, but the sight of him behind wire unsettles them. Simon, who had padded freely across steel decks and curled in hammocks beside wary men, now presses his nose to bars, his eyes searching for the wide corridors of a ship that no longer surrounds him. At first, there is resilience. He adapts, as he always has, with the quiet strength of one who learned to survive on Hong Kong's back streets. He bats at straw, curls upon himself, and watches the comings and goings with that same calm that once steadied sailors in storm and fire. The men visit when they can, voices low, hands reaching through to scratch behind his ears. Letters arrive at the station, some addressed not to captain or crew, but to Simon himself. The world waits eagerly for his official return, for medals to be placed, for stories to be told. It seems a brief inconvenience, this cage, a pause before celebration, but the body holds its limits. The wounds of war, though stitched and scarred, have left their toll. Shrapnel once pierced his small frame, and though he lived, there are depths of injury unseen. Infection finds those weakened places, threads itself quietly into his blood. At first it is only weariness. Simon sleeps longer, moves slower, greets visitors with softer purrs. Sailors whisper that he is merely tired from long travels, that soon his energy will return. Yet days stretch and shadows deepen beneath his eyes. His food goes untouched. The little warrior who once guarded stores with relentless zeal now curls listlessly, breath shallow and uneven. The keepers do what they can. Medicine is offered, blankets arranged, water refreshed. The ship's surgeon, who had once stitched Simon on blood-slick decks, cannot reach him here. Only trained staff are allowed inside, and though they care, they do not carry the same bond. They treat him as a patient, not a comrade. The sailors pace outside, helpless. They who had braved shells and river ambushes now face an enemy they cannot outgun nor outmaneuver. Infection that spreads in silence, invisible and merciless. Hope flickers like a lantern in a storm. Some days seem brighter when Simon rises to greet them with faint mews or curls briefly against a hand before sinking again into sleep. These moments feed belief. He has 9 lives, they remind each other. He's spent many already, but there is one more for this. They cling to the idea that resilience is infinite, that courage itself can keep the heart beating. Yet nature does not bend to medals or titles, nor to prayers whispered through steel bars. The fever comes, soft at first, then burning. His small body shivers, and his fur dulls with sickness. Visitors watch with stricken faces, unable to hide grief. Men who had seen comrades fall in battle now weep for a cat, and yet to them Simon is no mere animal. He is a symbol of endurance, the echo of courage that carried them through months of siege. His survival had once mirrored their own. His fight had kept them alive in spirit. To lose him feels like losing a brother, a reminder that no victory is without cost. Outside the station, the world still waits for a hero's return. Newspapers prepare headlines, children write letters, medals lie ready to be pinned upon a ribbon. Crowds imagine the day Simon will walk, tail held high, into ceremonies that celebrate survival. But within quarantine, time runs differently. Days narrow into hours, hours into fragile minutes, and in one of those minutes, the small heart that once beat fiercely against fire and flood grows still. No sound marks the moment, no guns, no trumpets, no fanfare. Only the quiet of a final breath and the silence that follows. Word spreads quickly among the men. The news strikes with the same weight as cannon fire. Some refuse to believe it at first, pacing, muttering, searching for proof that it is mistake. Others sit in stillness, eyes wet, remembering soft paws that once kneaded their chests, whiskers that brushed against calloused hands. Letters continue to arrive at the station, addressed to Simon, unaware that their recipient can no longer reply. The sailors read them anyway, voices breaking as they imagine his response. The world, too, mourns. When the announcement is made, newspapers print not just facts but sorrow. Editorials write of bravery, of loyalty, of how a creature so small could embody resilience so great. Children who had drawn pictures of him now cry at kitchen tables, their parents explaining that heroes, even cats, cannot live forever. The medals prepared are not rescinded. They are given posthumously, shining honours that catch the light but cannot warm the cold earth. Quarantine, once a place of waiting, becomes a chamber of grief. Sailors gather there, their silence heavy, their uniforms damp with tears. They press their hands to the bars that once confined him, as if to leave a final touch. They murmur promises to remember, to carry his name back across seas, to ensure his story is not forgotten in the shuffle of war reports and official speeches. For them, Simon is not gone. He is simply transferred to memory, to the echo of purrs that will forever hum in their hearts. And so the last battle ends not with triumph but with surrender. Yet in that surrender lies no defeat, for what is remembered cannot die, and what is loved remains beyond the reach of time. Simon's courage lingers in every letter written, in every sailor's story retold, in every quiet tear shed by those who never even met him. His life, brief in years, is boundless in meaning. In the stillness of the quarantine station, as night falls and shadows lengthen, one can almost imagine the faint sound of paws padding away, not in weakness but in peace, as though the little sailor walks once more down the long corridors of his ship, tail high, finding his way to hammocks and hearts that will always make room for him. And when the silence grows heavy, the men begin to plan the farewell he deserves, a funeral not for a stray, but for a comrade. For history will not let him vanish, it will carry him forward into memory. The day of Simon's funeral dawns with a hushed kind of reverence. There is no roar of cannons, no thunder of marching boots, no swelling of military bands. Instead, the mourning carries a gentler tone, as though the world itself has decided that silence is the truest music for farewell. A small crowd gathers, not of generals or kings, but of sailors, officers, and ordinary people whose hearts had been caught by the story of a cat who became more than anyone imagined. The place is Ilford Animal Cemetery, tended by the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals, a sanctuary where creatures who served and comforted are given rest. Here lie dogs that once sniffed through rubble in the Blitz, carrier pigeons who braved the skies under fire, and now, at the edge of a quiet path lined with headstones, a place has been prepared for Simon. The soil waits, dark and open, and beside it a headstone already carved with his name. Able Seacut Simon, HMS Amethyst, died 1949. The sailors arrive in dress uniforms, their polished shoes pressing softly into the damp earth. These are men hardened by war, men who have seen blood on steel decks and carried comrades wrapped in canvas to the sea. Yet here their eyes glisten openly, and no one feels shame in letting tears fall. They stand shoulder to shoulder, their grief woven with pride, remembering how this small creature once padded through smoke and ruin to bring comfort, how he hunted tirelessly when hunger threatened, how he curled against the wounded with the tenderness no medicine could provide. The medals come first. Simon's Dickin Medal, often called the animal's Victoria Cross, gleams as it is placed upon the casket. Around it are set the ribbons and honours he received, tokens that speak of courage in a language both men and animals can understand. They are more than metal, they are memory forged into form, proof that his service was not imagination but reality. Even in death, he is not dismissed as just a cat. He is recognized as sailor, comrade, hero. Flowers follow. Bouquets from strangers who never met him, from children who wrote letters, from sailors' wives who read of him in papers, all gather in bright heaps around the grave. Some are humble wildflowers picked from roadside verges, others are roses and lilies ordered carefully, but together they speak one language: gratitude. The earth becomes hidden beneath colours, as though the world is determined that Simon should not rest in plain soil, but in a garden of living beauty. When the time comes, the casket is lowered. It is small, startlingly small against the vastness of human coffins, yet the weight it carries is immense. Silence holds for a moment, the kind of silence where every breath is heard, where hearts seem louder than the world. Then a bugler lifts his instrument, and the notes of the last post rise into the air. The music is thin and haunting, drifting upward as if to call the spirit of the sailor cat to one final watch. Men bow their heads. Some whisper prayers, others only stand in thought, but all feel the gravity of the moment. After the bugle fades, words are spoken. They are not elaborate speeches crafted by statesmen, but simple tributes from those who knew him. A sailor recalls the night when Simon appeared at his hammock, curling against his chest when fear of death made sleep impossible. Another speaks of storerooms cleared of rats, of how Simon's persistence saved food and perhaps lives. Another, his voice catching, remembers how the little cat endured wounds alongside them and survived against all odds. Until now, the stories weave together, threads of memory spun into a tapestry that no official history could deny. For each man, this funeral is more than farewell to a cat. It is a farewell to the siege itself, to the months of terror and hunger, to the faces of comrades who did not return. Simon is not separate from those memories. He is part of them, the soft counterpoint to the harshness of war. By laying him to rest with honours, they also honour themselves, their survival, their bond, and the resilience that carried them through. Children stand at the edges of the crowd, holding the hands of parents who brought them to witness. Some clutch small drawings, cats with medals, ships with sails, leaving them among the flowers. In their eyes, Simon becomes not just a naval mascot, but a lesson. That bravery can come in any shape, that loyalty does not always wear uniform or speak words. These children will grow, carrying the story with them, telling it to their own children. And so the cat's life extends far beyond its years. The earth is filled back, slowly, carefully. Soil falls with soft thuds, covering wood, then flowers, then memory itself. Yet even as the grave closes, the headstone remains a marker against forgetfulness. Upon it, words are carved not only of name and date, but of service. Here lies able Seacart Simon, who served with distinction, who received the Dickin Medal, who comforted and defended. The stone will not speak aloud, but all who pass will read, and in reading will remember. The sailors linger long after the ceremony. Some kneel to press hands against the fresh earth. Some sit quietly on nearby benches, eyes distant, lost in memories of smoke-filled corridors and the soft vibration of a purr against weary ribs. They know they will leave soon, return to ships and duties, but this place will hold a piece of them. And when they sail again, they will carry Simon not in hammocks or storerooms, but in the hidden chambers of their hearts. Evening draws in, and shadows lengthen over the cemetery. The flowers glow faintly in the dimming light, the headstone catching the last glimmer of sun. Visitors drift away, footsteps fading into silence. Yet the grave does not stand lonely. Birds rustle in branches, a breeze stirs the grass, and somewhere beyond sight, other animals rest in their own honoured places. Simon is among them now, part of a company of creatures who served with quiet courage, whose stories remind the world that valor is not confined to humankind. And so the sailor's funeral closes. Not with grandeur, not with banners or victory parades, but with tenderness. The tenderness of men unashamed to grieve, of strangers touched by a tale, of children who see heroism in whiskers. In death, as in life, Simon unites rather than divides, comforts rather than commands, softens the hard edges of history with something small and gentle. In the stillness of Ilford, beneath flowers and medals, the little ship's cat rests, but above the grave, memory stirs like a tide. For history remembers not only kings and conquests, but also the quiet echo of pause, the bravery of a heart that beat in fur. Simon is gone, yet he remains in story, in stone, in every sailor's whispered remembrance. And as night settles over Ilford, the grave lies, calm beneath its flowers, but memory does not sleep. It carries forward, whispering through time. Time has a way of softening sharp memories. Battles that once seemed all-consuming fade into footnotes. Names of admirals slip quietly from living tongues, and ships that shook the waters are dismantled, their steel carried away as scrap. Yet some stories do not vanish. They ripple outward, carried not by strategy or power, but by tenderness, by the kind of memory that clings to the heart rather than the history book. Simon's story is one such ripple. In Ilford, the seasons turn. Spring scatters blossoms across the cemetery, petals falling like soft tributes upon rows of stones. Summer brings children, their shoes crunching gravel as they follow parents to the grave with the little carved cat. Autumn rains darken the earth, and winter folds everything in a white hush. Through it all, Simon's resting place is never bare. Flowers appear as though by unseen hands. Sometimes a fresh bouquet, sometimes a single wild daisy tucked against the stone. Decades pass, yet the grave remains tended, as if time itself bows in respect. Visitors linger there longer than they expect. Some come because they knew the ship or once wore the same uniform. Others come because they read the story in a newspaper or stumbled upon it in a book of animal heroes. And children come most of all. They kneel at the stone, tracing letters with small fingers, eyes wide at the idea that a cat could be a sailor, that whiskers once bore medals. Parents retell the tale in hushed voices, watching as wonder settles in young minds. The lesson plants itself gently. Courage is not measured by size, and love is never wasted. The Royal Navy, too, keeps his memory alive. Among sailors, stories of mascots abound: dogs, parrots, even bears who once marched alongside troops. Yet Simon is spoken of with particular fondness. His name is shared in training halls, in lectures about morale, in quiet conversations on long voyages where the sea feels endless and men search for something to remind them they are not alone. There was once a cat, they begin, and already shoulders relax and smiles flicker in the lamplight. Books are written, retelling his life in pages that mix fact and affection. Some are careful, noting dates, ship names, and battles. Others lean into story, imagining his thoughts, shaping his adventures for children who curl beneath blankets with eyes half closed, listening. Each version carries truth, that Simon mattered, that his small life gave strength in the midst of storm. Even as decades stretch, his name does not grow faint. He remains a companion not only to the men who knew him, but to strangers who carry his tale in their hearts. Memory has its own geography. In Hong Kong, where a stray kitten once prowled alleys for scraps, some still whisper of the beginnings of able sea cat Simon. In Britain, where medals glimmer in glass cases, his story is woven into the broader fabric of naval history. And in Ilford, his grave anchors the tale, a fixed point where past meets present. To stand before that stone is to feel the convergence of time, the roar of guns on the Yangtze, the hush of quarantine, the tenderness of sailors who wept unashamed. There is something quietly profound in the persistence of such memory. History often exalts conquerors, kings, and commanders. Statues rise for emperors, portraits line grand halls, streets carry the names of generals. Yet here, in a modest cemetery, a simple headstone ensures that a cat, once overlooked in a Hong Kong alley, holds his own place in remembrance. This is not sentimentality alone. It is a recognition that courage can take forms small enough to curl in a hammock, that companionship can shape the will to endure. Children who once heard his tale have grown old. Some return as adults, laying flowers not for a hero of their own time, but for a cat whose story shaped their sense of loyalty. They bring their own children, repeating the ritual, keeping the chain unbroken. Teachers bring students on quiet trips, pointing to Simon's stone as they speak of the animals who shared humanity's burdens of war. Veterans come too, some long retired, standing in silence with medals pinned to jackets, saluting as though the little sailor might somehow feel the gesture from beneath the earth. And so Simon's story lingers not only as history, but as inheritance. It belongs to anyone who has ever found comfort in the company of an animal, to anyone who has felt steadied by a presence that asks for nothing but gives so much. His story assures us that even the smallest lives can shape the great tide of human endurance. That gentleness and resilience are not opposites but allies. At night, when the cemetery falls into stillness, it is easy to imagine the echoes. The faint sound of paws along gravel paths, the soft vibration of a purr woven into the hush of wind through trees. Of course, reason tells us it is only imagination, only the lingering of memory shaped by longing. Yet memory itself is powerful. It carries life where none remains. It preserves warmth in the face of cold years. And in that way, Simon still walks. He still hunts the rats of despair, still curls against the weary, still carries courage in whiskers. Time will continue to move. More wars will come, more ships will sail, more names will be written and forgotten. But in Ilford, in books, in voices that pass his story along, Simon endures. His grave is small, his life shorter still, but his echo is vast. It stretches across oceans, across decades, across the fragile yet unbreakable bridge between human and animal. Sometimes, when one reads the headstone or listens to the old sailors tell their tale, a thought rises unbidden. History is not only the clash of empires or the signatures on treaties. It is also the purr in a soldier's chest, the soft comfort of fur against grief, the loyalty that refuses to break even in the smoke of battle. In Simon, history remembers not power, but tenderness. And perhaps that is why his story lingers, because it reminds us of what we most wish to believe, that love, in whatever form, is stronger than fear. And as the decades fade, Simon's grave still blooms with flowers, his story still whispered like a lullaby through time, an echo that reminds us that even the quietest lives can outlast the loudest wars. And so the story draws to a hush. The sea lies still, the guns long silenced, and only the memory of gentle paws lingers, soft as a ripple fading on water. Simon's tale reminds us that courage is not bound to crowns or titles, but can live quietly in fur, in whiskers, in the heartbeat of one who simply stays when others need him most. Once a stray in the shadows of Hong Kong, forgotten and overlooked, he became a sailor, a brother in arms, a comfort in the darkest hours. His story drifts to us across decades, not as a roar, but as a purr, a reminder that history is not only written in monuments and battles, but also in the quiet, loyal presence of those who refuse to abandon us. Thank you for sharing this quiet space with me tonight, for pausing in the stillness and letting this little candle of memory burn beside us. Each time you listen, this circle of calm grows wider, a constellation of souls scattered across the world, connected by stories and silence. And now, dear listener, it is time to set aside the weight of the day. Allow your breath to soften, your body to grow heavy with rest. Let Simon's lesson accompany you into sleep, that even the smallest life can steady a ship through storms. May your dreams carry you gently, as though rocked by calm waters beneath the hush of night. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in and history hums its lullaby. If tonight's journey has brought you peace, you are always welcome to return and wander again through the corridors of time. For now, let the lantern dim, let the story rest, and may your night be calm, your rest deep, and your dreams kind.